Welcome to Hail to the Podcast, the flagship podcast of the Maize and Blue Review. We cover Michigan athletics over at michigan.rivals.com, obviously for the Rivals Network. I am Trevor McCue, joined as always by our insider, publisher, savant, Mr. Do-It-All. Wearing his Manchester City shirt, which has been in the closet for most of the year, while Arsenal has been leading the way, but now you're proud to represent. Anyway, Josh Henschke is here. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good. This is my second shirt. My first one's in the wash currently, so it's not been in the closet, and I'll be wearing it with pride throughout the rest of the season as they win a third straight Premier League title and also win their first Champions League. So.
Oh yeah, they're good. Yeah, they drew with Real. We'll see.
Yeah.
Do you remember our conversation at the start of the year? And
me
right.
So, and it's all going exactly how I thought it would.
So I wanted to get into Premier League. A lot of folks are into it. I'm attracted to the tradition, the European soccer, blah blah blah, whatever. I'm like, well, I got to pick a team to root for, and I don't want to bandwagon and get on City because if you haven't been rooting for them for years, that's just like. I'd say getting on the Yankees, but that's not really the case anymore. But you know what I mean, right? They're the cream of the crop, whatever. So I'm asking Josh all these different teams, and everybody kept telling me, well, Arsenal's like Michigan, right? Like they used to be really good, but they have some young guys where I'm like, okay, cool. I don't want to be a bandwagon fan. I want to root for somebody that's fun, that's on the up and come. And then they lead for the majority of the season, and I got to pretend to be this loyal Arsenal fan. These guys have been miserable for years, and I'm just like, yay, I'm a gunner. So I kind of stopped getting into it because I felt bad that I picked a team that was doing so well. But anyway, so obviously we're here today to talk about primarily Michigan football. We might touch on basketball, but the summer's coming, so eventful off season, spring practices all complete. Their summer trip is done, and we're kind of hitting a nice little lull here before the big barbecue at the big house event. So I think that's where I want to start because that's really been the story of the last few weeks, which is Michigan has the number one 2024 recruiting class in the country right now. To have such a good class this early in the year, Josh, I know you've covered recruiting obviously a lot longer than I have. After everything everybody was saying about the 2023 class, this turnaround is dramatic to say the least. But aside from the obvious answers, what's going into this monster class, highly ranked so early in the year? What's Michigan doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the $1 million question is what everyone is trying to figure out is what Michigan is doing right, compared to last year, where a lot of things seem to be going wrong. And excuse me, I think a lot of factors play into that. NIL obviously being part of it. I don't think it's all of it. I think a good majority of it is that Michigan has an established staff now that has, established relationships with recruits and coaches and programs across the country. And they didn't necessarily have that. I guess they didn't have that continuity, a new defensive coordinator after a first-year defensive coordinator that didn't really have any ties to any recruit or any program. So, you had guys like a Jesse Minter coming in, when you're pretty much have a developed recruiting board and you come in and you have to, pick and choose where the recruiting board started and kind of work your way in there as well. Chris Partridge, I kind of, don't necessarily include in that argument because that guy can go into any situation and recruit well. But him being an established recruiter and having established relationships and Michigan recruiting, there's some overlap between Ole Miss and Michigan when it comes to recruiting, but not a ton. But success, I think, probably is paramount, is number one. I think above everything, it's just the on-field success. You're starting.
Winning helps. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think winning really trumps all the other arguments that you can make. NIL obviously part of it. Established coaches with continuity and with that building relationships and something I thought was interesting when Sharon Moore was on the In the Trenches podcast this week. He kind of mentioned when asked about recruiting. how many people were recruiting against Michigan negatively because he didn't have any experience as a play caller. So I guess that's part of it too. So as I said, there's just so many different avenues and different scenarios that are currently going in Michigan's favor, which really can credit to the turnaround. But yeah, I don't think there's really one specific answer outside of winning that really kind of has helped Michigan so far.
I think the relationships piece is so underrated in this conversation. You know, obviously what you were hearing and what we were talking about on the boards, you know, during 23, post 21 off season, right? That Harbaugh was the difference between the Vikings and the Broncos thing, right? He was very genuine and sincere that he was going to entertain this Vikings offer and that he was interested in going back to the NFL. And he was telling players and recruits this. Versus this last cycle with the Broncos, I think Harbaugh takes the call because he thinks that's the right thing to do, whatever. But he was telling everyone he's not going.
Yeah.
Right. Very different. And then, yeah, you have a new offensive coordinator and a new defensive coordinator coming out of 21. Right. Gaddis is gone. McDonald is gone. And there was some talk about was 21 a fluke. Right. Which is maybe a fair thing to say, right? Sometimes you have those destiny type seasons, right? We want to see it again. And I think that as much as everyone wanted to just bash NIL and say that was obviously the only issue, the Harbaugh to NFL thing was way more real the last time around. You've got, and we're seeing the benefit of the established relationships now, right?
Yep.
That's paying off dividends. And you did it again in 2022, right? You're for real now. Right, the 21 thing wasn't a fluke. This is what Harbaugh's vision for Michigan always was, and now they're there. So I think you have an easier sell, an easier buy-in from recruits, and the 23 class isn't terrible.
Yeah, right.
Right, we're going to start already this year with a few guys,
right,
that are going to come out. And we're going to be like, oh wait, where was he ranked? What? Right, and obviously next year, I think it's going to be similar to 2018, where you go back and look at these guys and go, oh man, they were really valuable pieces to this team, right? So now, obviously, you don't have what has become the prized recruit of this class, and that's 5-star quarterback Jaden Davis. We talked about Davis for over a year, right? There's almost this relief when he committed, and then I think the first thing everybody was asking was like, oh, well, is he going to stick? Or are they going to have to fight off? He's shut that down, right? Yeah. And I think that was something we were trying to tell folks too, was part of the reason he's not committing right away is he wants to be done when he commits. He doesn't want to commit and then have to keep going on trips and keep dealing with recruiting. When he commits, he's done. So he made sure he was positive where he went. He's immediately got his recruiting hat on. Obviously, we saw Channing Goodwin, maybe the least surprising commit of all time, coming in, right? Legacy. He was somebody involved really early from Providence Day. So everybody wants to know now, right there. You see these guys. This is a super tight-knit group.
Yeah.
Right. They're all recruiting. And every time somebody says, like, here's my top 7, or I'm going to commit on this date, or, you know, where should I go? You see Blake Frazier, Jordan Marshall, right? Jaden Davis, these guys blasting at these kids. So that's what everybody wants to know. I know you put it up recently, the who's next, but it feels like the dominoes, right? We're getting one every couple of weeks now. So Aaron Childs released a top 3 recently, but what are the kind of guys we're looking up next on the horizon to get into this class?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of scenarios of Michigan picking up guys. I mean, there's really nothing, I guess, on the horizon in terms of immediate, you know, guys coming up with commitments. But again, recruiting is just so fickle that, you know, it could change in a heartbeat. So, I mean, I guess at this point, you can kind of just list the guys that are most likely to commit. I mean, Aaron Childs, you mentioned, I think Michigan is in a really good spot for Childs. I really like Michigan's chances once they come out of the official visit. I know he has one scheduled to Michigan in June, and obviously Maryland and Florida will get their shots. But I think Michigan will wrap that one up pretty quickly once he gets on campus. And to kind of preface everything else I'm going to say, I think a lot more of the action for Michigan is going to start resuming again in June. Jeremiah Beasley, in-state linebacker, is committing at the end of June, and I'm expecting Michigan to be the choice there. Again, expecting Childs to possibly drop in June. So I think it's good that Michigan is secured a bunch of really good offensive talent, but I think now it's time that they start getting some momentum on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, they have really good guys committed, like Mason Curtis and Jacob Oden at the top of my head. And someone else that could join too, Jacob Smith.
Jared. I say Jared's the highest rated defensive recruit right now, but
yeah,
his twin brother is even better. So it's quite a tandem right there.
Yeah, and when you look at twins from a historical lens, you don't really see them splitting up. I mean, you see brothers splitting up where there may be an age gap. That's happened before. But you don't really see twin brothers splitting up and going to different schools. I mean, obviously you can talk about the Green twins in Michigan and Jamon and Jermon. And also the Adamalola twins from Notre Dame as well, who both played on the defensive line. So from a historical standpoint, I mean, and Jacob said all the right things, that he wants to take his time, that he's not necessarily locked in on following with his brother anywhere. And Jared said the same thing. He's not going to force his brother to join him or force his hand. But again, when you look at it from just not even just from the historical viewpoint, from something that just makes sense. I'm expecting, I haven't officially put in a prediction yet because I'm still kind of waiting to hear a couple more things before I do so. But I'm heavily leaning towards putting a prediction in for Michigan for the Smith twins basically to come in. I mean, there's guys that are out there for Michigan and guys that Michigan sit in a really good spot for right now, but to say like who's next, I can't really say definitively because again, these commitments come in the blink of the eye, and a couple of them are set for next month. So I don't know if May is going to be the big major fireworks month for the football program, but I mean, obviously you started off with Shannon Goodwin, which is always a good thing. So there's a possibility, can't ever rule it out, but I'm leaning towards June for the next kind of big crop of guys that come off the board.
I think I've got two things I want to hammer on, and I'm going to come back to the last point in a second. But obviously, then who's next? We've named a few, right? But like if you start going through your head and thinking about folks that either are heavy leans or you think Michigan's in a good position for or whatever, and you look at this class and you're like, oh, they're 16. How big can this class get?
Yeah.
Like I think Michigan's expecting a pretty mass exodus after this year, right? Like they're being pretty open about they want to go break the NFL draft record. Like that's how many dudes they think are, whether literally have exhausted eligibility or juniors that could potentially leave early. They're expecting maybe a little room. And without getting into the scholarship situation, they're going to take dudes that they want, figure it out later kind of thing, right? Yep. But I mean, are they going to get up to 30 dudes in this class? Like, it kind of looks like it could get that big. Like, we've talked about some big names where it's like first come, first serve spot, but it's like, are they really going to turn away a certain high 4-star player?
Yeah.
They're not, right? So, I don't know. Do you think it could get that big? Because you start talking about the linebackers they're looking at, a couple corners, wide receivers. There's still a few guys that got to drop. It's like, dude, this class could get huge.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, excuse me, and I think in this common age of the transfer portal and everything else, I think, these heavy classes of a lot of guys kind of make sense because you never really know. But at the same time, you can also make the argument that you can go less too, because now Michigan has shown that they can recruit the portal with not necessarily grad transfer guys. Right. So you can go a little less, say, you have room for 30 guys. You can take 24, 25 guys and then earmark those 5 to 6 or whatever, how many scholarship spots you have open for the portal. And kind of boost your roster that way. So, I mean, this class could certainly get to 30 guys, but would they want to get there considering that they can, effectively recruit the portal now? I don't really know, but, a class of 30 guys can make sense if they have the right amount of guys that are coming in. And, if they're all these guys that they're in on, if they can land them, I mean, I guess, the sky's the limit with this class. So, Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of avenues that they can kind of explore, but yeah, I mean, it really just kind of depends on their portal strategy too, how they want to beef up their roster that way.
I'm going to be really interested to see with the portal next year. Like if it's, I think we're kind of seeing it with corner right now.
Mm-hmm.
They don't feel desperate for a corner,
Yeah,
but if the right guy was there with that fits the system, veteran experience that they think they can plug in, that adds depth, et cetera, they'll go after him. And I think you can say that about a lot of these positions. Like AJ Barner was a no-brainer fit,
mm-hmm.
right, for this team. Would they been fine with the tight ends they had? Maybe, right? Ernest Hausman, now obviously Hill Greenleaves, I don't want to get too into the weeds with it, but these guys where it's like, well, this is just a no-brainer fit. We're going to plug this in and figure it out.
Yeah.
Or are they going to actively, like you said, because you get in the whole, is an established player better than a 5-star or high 4-star recruit? Well, yeah, if you already know what they are in college, there's some value to that, right? So
Right.
I'll be interested to see if the portal kind of adjusts year to year, or if this is the new Michigan strategy for sure.
Yeah.
You brought up, and I saw a comment on Beasley. I want to talk about him and another player you didn't mention, because I think these two players, their recruitment and just how it's gone, just perfectly symbolizes what has happened with Michigan in the last couple of years, especially with the rivals, Jeremiah Beasley, and Aaron Scott, right?
Yeah.
Both of those guys, if we talked about Michigan talking to them or pursuing them, I don't want to say it would be laughed off, but like it would be understood that like Aaron Scott's not leaving Springfield. He's going to Ohio State. And Jeremiah Beasley, even up until recently, was considered an MSU lean, but like that big linebacker from Belleville, that's an MSU guy a few years ago.
Yeah.
Right. And for Michigan to not only be competitive in those recruitments and be taken seriously, not like, well, obviously it's Michigan, I'm going to come visit. Right. That was a lot of what would maybe happen with some of the Ohio State guys. Well, yeah, I'm going to come visit. Right. But they were always, there's I would say, very probable chance they're like, if I had to bet right now, I know we don't have predictions in for either one.
Right.
But if I had to pick a school right now, I'm picking Michigan for both of those guys.
Well, my prediction is in for Beasley.
It isn't for Beasley. You're right. I apologize.
Yeah. No, it's fine. I saw him at the spring game, and then I was like, yeah, this is it. But yeah, I mean, again, as I mentioned earlier, he's another guy that you kind of get lost in the shuffle with, because you have McDonald recruiting him, and then you switch over to Minter, and then obviously Hilo to Chris Partridge. But again, Partridge is one of those guys that you don't have to worry about. But again, at the same time, he's also showing you how effective of a recruiter he is, because he's not the sole reason why Michigan's back in this thing, but he's a big part of it. And he's a major reason why I think Beasley's going to commit to Michigan at the end of June. And I think they've been getting they've done a really good job with him. At one point, I was thinking he was going to head to Tennessee, and I think Michigan was thinking he was going to head to Tennessee too. But then he delayed his commitment, and that kind of allowed Michigan to get back in, into things. And that was right around the time where he kind of put off his commitment, is when Michigan kind of really picked it back up with him. So, coincidence, I don't know, but yeah, I think Michigan is going to land him. And then, you talk about Aaron Scott too. I mean, my prediction isn't in for Michigan, but I am leaning towards doing it. At some point. I really think Michigan's going to land Aaron Scott. I think if I were to sit here and say, hey, Ohio State will take Bryce West, but you guys can take Aaron Scott, I think you'd be 100% happy with that trade. I think Aaron Scott doesn't necessarily, he understands that Bryce West is like the guy in the state, but he doesn't necessarily want to follow and be caught in his shadow. He's very much his own person, and it's kind of shown where his recruitment is really over the board, like all over the place. He's Cincinnati, Notre Dame is in there too. Obviously Michigan, he's visited a couple times. So the options are, I think it's going to be Michigan for Aaron Scott. And, obviously things can change. It's May, it's still so early, but Yeah. We'll see. I mean, and I do before we move on, I do want to address something Jason
I was
mentioned.
gonna pull that up. That's so
Yeah.
funny. Yeah.
No, he's 100% correct. I heard last week that Max Anderson is likely going to look elsewhere, just because Michigan got the 5 linemen, and I think the
Well,
max they're
we've
going
been
to.
saying for a while that for that last spot, if it was going to be Anderson or Warren, we felt like Anderson was shading away, and it might be
Yeah.
more likely that would be Bennett Warren. They are swinging for the fences.
Yeah.
Another tackle recruit, right? So that's still open. But yeah, that kind of felt like, we've been talking about who would move inside, and I thought Frazier and Hamilton seemed the most likely. But Roebuck is 6'8", 330 now, I think is what it was at that camp he was at this week. Good, right.
Yeah.
And then Sprague on the other side. So yeah, tackle's pretty resolved. I wasn't shocked to see Anderson shade away there.
Yeah, it got to the point where it kind of was like the understanding that someone was going to wait too long and wait out their spot. And, we talk about like losing a 4-star guy at this point, just the way that they're recruiting the offensive line, you could say, all right, well, that's okay. Last year, there'd be pitchforks and, fire everywhere.
It's crazy. What a difference.
Losing out on a 5-star guy. So I think the total, I think they're going to go with 6 offensive linemen in this class. If for some whatever reason some guy like a Brandon Baker out of California,
you're not turning him down.
No, you're not turning him down at all. And so I think they could go to 7 if there was a special circumstance. But yeah, I think 6 is going to be the number. Bennett Warren is still out there, still high on Michigan. Max Anderson was, from my understanding, that he's still a take for Michigan if he wants to come, but just the numbers crunch right now, he's going to probably look elsewhere and see if he can find an opportunity. But, who knows? It may circle back to Michigan. I don't know. But, at the end of the day, Michigan's offensive line class is going to be ridiculous, even with or without Anderson. So I think they'll be okay when all is said and done. But, yeah, 6 is definitely looking like the number so far.
Yeah, that group is insane. And again, as deep as that offensive line room is right now, they could have 5 new starters next year. Actually, it's probably realistic, right? So there's going to be some quick turn there. So I'm not shocked to see that class. But just, one more time, I want to say it because the Beasley thing is just such a big statement to me. We're obviously a Michigan show, Michigan site, whatever. But when you talk about how you're doing in the state and how important that is with the Michigan State rivalry, if Mel Tucker can't get Jeremiah Beasley, I don't know what he's going to do with that program. Like, that's the dudes that Mark D'Antonio built Michigan State on.
Yep.
So, that's not only are you getting better everywhere else in the country, but you're cutting them off at the knees by getting, that's an MSU guy. It just is. So I think on the field, we've seen what Michigan's done. But what's happening, the Aaron Scott conversation too, man, that's these guys who used to be comfortable with the assumption they were going to Ohio State, feeling like, I want to get out of this guy's shadow. I want to blaze my own trail. I'm going to Michigan. That's Charles Woodson stuff, right? Like, that's that era in the 90s when they were pulling the Ohio kids. So, we can move right into that. Why not?
Yeah,
the obvious question of Beasley, because they've been coming together and he's been coming often. 2025 QB Bryce Underwood. So first off, obviously he's the number 1 QB in the class. He's the top target. You talked about Partridge coming in and what he's done for Beasley. We could dedicate this entire show to Kirk Campbell.
Oh, absolutely.
What he did to close the deal with Davis first. Not that I thought he was away from Michigan, but I think Davis always knew he wanted Michigan. But he had hesitation and questions, and it's always easy to bash the guy after he left. But we've heard what the families have said, both Davis and Underwood, right? So Campbell comes in, he closes that deal, whatever reservations Davis had, done. And now Bryce Underwood, who we've all said, look, obviously you want a guy that good when he's in your backyard, but he's probably going to want to get out of state. Like, we're kind of preparing people for I'm going to say Dante Moore type situation, right?
Yeah.
Since Campbell, it feels like every week this is pulling closer and closer to Michigan.
Yeah. You can kind of see the difference in the trajectory of how everything's changed with Kirk Campbell taking over. I think you nailed it. I don't think Jaden Davis was ever a threat to go anywhere else, but it kind of was a perfect storm of crap for Michigan, essentially. I mean, you had another round of Jim Harbaugh, the NFL rumors. Then you had Matt Weiss abruptly leaving, and that kind of culminated into the Davis base getting kind of freaked out a little bit. But again, credit to Harbaugh for calling the Davis family and kind of calming those fears. And then Kirk Campbell coming in and settling things down even further and kind of making it known that, they want him there and Campbell's going to be there. So how that relates to Underwood, again, I'm not sold that Underwood's going to end up at Michigan. I think Michigan has a good shot. It's just one of those conundrums where, you hear so many different things from so many different people. There isn't necessarily a consensus that, of what's happening. I have one half that says, oh no, he just wants, as you mentioned, he wants to leave the state. He doesn't want to play in the state of Michigan. He wants to go down south. Another half is, hey, watch out for Michigan. And this is kind of the second half of that argument has kind of been the one that's been bubbling up to the surface more lately. And facts are facts. He's visited multiple times, mostly unannounced, just showing up midweek. So, I mean, that speaks to something, that's not just, a guy spending a lazy Wednesday, in Ann Arbor.
He's comfortable at Michigan.
Right. Exactly.
That's not a secret. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So, you can't discount those visits. But, again, everyone else in the country wants him. So, it's not going to be, like an LSU, for example, or an Alabama, whatever. I'm just throwing two random schools out there, but, them just saying, oh, he's a Michigan guy. It's all right. We'll just back off and go somewhere else. No, it's, they're going to recruit him hard until the very end. The more this develops, the more it looks like Underwood is the number one guy on their board. I mean, it's evolved so much. A guy like Stone Saunders, like Cutter Boley, Ryan Hamilton. Luke's his brother. Is Luke? I always Montgomery. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. I always get that.
Like, wait, they're brothers.
Luke Hamilton. No, Luke Hamilton. Obviously, the offensive line commit. But no, the Montgomery from Ohio. So there's a bunch of guys, but that's evolved so much lately that it really looks like Underwood is the number one guy on their board, and how could you blame him? You got a number one recruit in your backyard. You got to recruit him. So we'll see. I mean, I'm not. We're what, May 10th, and I can't sit here and say, this is where
Davis committed, so we had to immediately jump on the 25 wagon.
Right.
What happened? No break, 25.
Right. Exactly. So I can't really sit here and say, hey, this is where things are trending with Underwood, but I can say that Michigan is in it. This isn't a cursory, just doing it for the hell of it. Michigan is legitimately in this race.
And let's be clear, there was a time with Weiss, they weren't in it.
Right. Absolutely. 100%.
Underwood's backed off, man.
100%. So. And again, yeah, which circles it right back to Kirk Campbell. A lot of the reason why Michigan is doing so well with these quarterback recruits is because of Kirk Campbell. And Underwood is another example of them getting right back into it. And obviously having that familiarity and Belleville being like, 20 minutes away from Ann Arbor. I mean, it helps, but you got to put the effort in. You got to recruit these
guys. That's what I was going to say. You still have to win it. And I remember when I was texting you after I spoke to somebody close to Underwood, and the way he explained it, you had heard something similar. It was just kind of this light bulb moment, right?
Yeah.
He's the number one quarterback. He doesn't want to just pick Michigan because that's the obvious thing, right? Like they could absolutely be the right program for him and fit, but he deserves to check everything else out, right?
Yeah.
And Michigan still has to win it. Being recruited by the school right down the road means the world to you. And you can feel that's the draw that you're towards. But if you don't literally check and go somewhere else and see, and that's why to me there's two paths, and this is kind of going to become an analogy moving forward. I think there's a Dante Moore type recruitment, and then there's a Donovan Edwards type recruitment. right? Edwards went to Ohio State. He went to Georgia. He was one of the top running backs. Everybody wanted him. He did his due diligence, and Ann Arbor was still home for him. He picked Michigan. Dante Moore did something similar and kind of confirmed, no, I do actually want to leave the state. This isn't just, I don't want to pick Michigan just to pick Michigan. So I think Underwood's going to go through something similar. He's comfortable. He's going to come to Michigan a ton. He's going to check out those other spots and then just kind of decide. But the fact that he's, again, that's in the same way Beasley, maybe a year ago, I would have been like, oh, that's an MSU kid.
Right.
Yeah. Underwood was kind of like, yeah, it's a bummer. You don't want to lose more in Underwood from your backyard, but it kind of feels like, it wasn't that long ago. You and I were saying, I thought Cutter Boley was probably what Michigan was going to be their top guy.
Yeah.
In the 25
definitely
class.
looked that way.
He skyrockets up the rankings. You're like, oh, backup guy. And then now, I mean, he's trending heavy to Kentucky. That whole taking an official visit in the summer, which he's only allowed to do because he's already academically a junior. A lot of signals that he might go to the 24 class.
Yep.
Which if he does that, Michigan's out. Right.
100%.
We've already discussed that. If Cutter Boley goes to 24, he will not be in the Michigan class, just to clarify.
Yes.
And then, so I think they've talked to McIntyre too. I mean, they're in on a bunch of
didn't even mention him. He's a 5-star kid. Forget about him in passing.
They're in on a lot of guys, right? So I think we're going to go into this summer, and then especially once football season starts, I think Jaden Davis is going to be the secret weapon here, just like JJ might have been for him in some ways.
Yeah.
Davis is going to help recruit whoever the next quarterback is. So if you have any question about what this dude means to Michigan, the recruiting hat he already has on for 24, he's been pretty candid about, I'm going to help for the next guy too. He's not scared of competition.
No, and I think that should be, the case, for any guy. I get it from a standpoint for Underwood that he wants to come in and compete right away. And when you got a guy like Jaden Davis that you're kind of in a similar class standing with, it's going to be difficult. But Michigan has shown in the past that they're willing to play 2 quarterbacks. And, if you get a guy like Underwood,
that's a really good point.
You're not going to have him rot on the bench. I mean, that's just, there's no way. So again, that's another conversation for another day. But I think, and it comes back down to recruiting at just recruiting in a general scope. If Michigan wants to be in the conversation with the big boys, you have to recruit against the big boys, and you have to beat the big boys. Beat the big boys on the field, beat the big boys for recruits. Not necessarily, it doesn't have to be all 5 stars, because Michigan's not typically a 5-star recruiting team. I mean, they do get their share of 5 stars, but they're not, picking and choosing from the rivals 100 and going 1 through 50. All right, we're going to offer them and go after them. It's kind of guys that fit what they want to do. But, if you can make statements like landing Underwood, landing Davis, and landing top guys at the position, you're going to have the attention of people, so and which opens up an argument against stars. I mean, I do think stars matter, and I do think Michigan could and probably should go after more 5-star guys, but they've proven to be so successful without them. Does another 5-star or 2 take them to the next level? I don't know, but I think to be in the conversation consistently year in and year out against, the Georgias, the Bamas, the Ohio States, whoever, whatever, you gotta compete. You gotta compete, and whether that's on the field, in recruiting, facilities, whatever, you gotta be on that same level, and in some cases exceeding that level.
Recruit. I mean, the stars matter when they're right, right?
Yeah, right.
Michigan does an incredible job at finding the underrated 3 or 4-star guys, the development. We've talked about that forever. But and we talked about the contrast between offer list and rating, right? Sometimes you see a highly rated guy and his offer list doesn't really check out and vice versa, right? So when that guy's a sure thing 5-star and every major program's offered him, he's the real deal. And I think you do need some of that. There's a formula to it. I don't think you just take 5 stars to be 5 stars if you're Michigan. You're winning because of the culture and the fit that you built and you want to find those fits, right? And as much as the Rod Moore matters and the Chris Jenkins matters and these guys, right? J.J. McCarthy, Donovan Edwards, Will Johnson.
Yep.
Right. So where at Ohio State might take 3 5-star receivers, knowing one of them is going to be Marvin Harrison Jr., future NFL star, and maybe one of them will be Julian Fleming. It doesn't meet potential, right? Mm-hmm. In the past under Harbaugh, I think Michigan took some 5-stars, and it didn't necessarily go the right way because they just took 5 stars to 5-star, right? Will Johnson, McCarthy, these are different guys, right? So I think if you can be a top 5, top 10 recruiting class, you're getting your dudes that they call them like they're 3-star recruits, but they recruit them like 5 stars, right? We've heard that phrase a lot with Marion Walker was one. I know there's some other, I don't want to think of them all right now, but you pepper in Jaden Davis, right? You pepper in Will Johnson, a guy like Mason Graham, who probably should have been a 5-star. You're the best player in California. Maybe that's a COVID situation or whatever. But I think this is Michigan. They're going to be a top 5, top 10 recruiting class with 1 or 2 5-stars when the situation comes up, when the fit's right. They're never going to recruit like Ohio State. And that's fine because honestly, not part of the reason, but your skill position guys are more likely to be 5-stars, right? It's going to be quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers. Mm-hmm. So Michigan might go after 5-star QB running back, but they're not going to load up on 5-star receivers. That's just not their MO, right? No. So anyway, I do think that's part of the formula. But what they're doing is working, and the peppering in the transfer portal, everything we've talked about tonight. So we've got.
I do want to point out this awesome comment.
Yep.
I think he absolutely nails it. I'll read it for those who aren't watching and will be listening to the podcast later, but it's honestly top 100 to 250 guys who are the most important. Those are the ones that are the real impact players, the ones who are true difference makers. 100% agree. That's I nails it.
Yeah.
Spot on. 100% spot on. And you look at the recruiting class for 24, that's right in the middle of where pretty much not all of them, but a good percentage of guys that they're in on or have are there. You look at obviously Jaden Davis is the outlier being a top.
But Marshall, Fraser, Prescorn.
Yep. Prescorn. Fraser is a top fringe 50 guy. The Aaron Childs is the top 100 guy. I'm
actually looking at. I kind of forgot a lot of these guys got their Michigan commit bump. So
yeah. That'll continue to happen when the season goes again. I don't know if anyone's going to get a bump to a 5-star, but they have some fringy 5-star guys like a Blake Frazier, Jordan Marshall, a bunch of guys, and I obviously don't want to, I'm not leaving anyone out on purpose, but those are just a couple of guys that come to mind. But to reference back to Shadyville, I think that's 100%. That's where Michigan's bread and butter should be. And it has been in the past. And, obviously, again, there's going to be outliers, whether it's above the 100 to 250 range or well below or somewhere in between. Michigan finds their guys. But I think a healthy mix of, guys that are in that range and, guys above it and guys below it. And, and you're hitting on these development guys. I mean, it's going to be, you're going to have success. So, again, it's just it all just depends on the development trajectory and everything else as well.
At the end of the day, the nice thing, that kid is freaking out. I'm sorry if you can hear him. At the end of the day now, like maybe it's an easy cop out, but what Michigan's doing is working. So I'm just not going to question it.
No,
the staff's earned it, man. And when you start talking about Jay, who's been here for a while, right?
Yep.
But Clink, Elston, Partridge, like on defense alone, those are recruiting monsters,
100%.
Right? And then Campbell's starting to show his chops. Bellamy's been a good guy coming from high school, but he's made some moves. Mike Hart is telling people to shut up because Mike Hart has come out like a cannon this cycle.
Yep.
I mean, every time I talk to a coach, it could be about a defensive player. in a different state, Texas is the one that comes to mind because he's been living there, it sounds like. They talk about Mike Hart.
Yeah.
Like he is going in there, they like the way he's recruiting. He's building relationships. He's making his presence known, but like this whole staff is just recruiting. I'm sure on more, obviously, right? Yeah. Just recruiting monsters. Yep. So, all right, we got 5 or 10 minutes to not ignore the other sport, which could be easier. We traded.
Yeah.
the Michigan football thing in basketball, they just can't. I can't level out. Right?
Yeah, they just cannot be on the same level. It's
the craziest thing, dude.
It's the way life is. It's the order of the world.
Yeah, some voodoo thing or something, right? So, the Hunter Dickinson saga is over. He's at Kansas. The made up Caleb Love saga. I don't know what to call that. Yeah. I don't know how many times you and I have had to fend off that rumor. He went online and kind of shut that down on his own.
Yeah, that's good. Glad he did that.
Yeah, me too. Because I'm like, I don't know. Is this the same thing? Like, what do you guys, where does this keep coming from? So anyway, there's 2 roster spots open. There's a void of information at this point. I think there's one guy we can kind of talk about and maybe what we think's happening there. But no information doesn't necessarily mean nothing's happening, but there is kind of a vibe of like, what is Michigan going to do? What is basketball going to do?
Yeah.
So, I mean, the one guy we're talking about, Tennessee Olivier, right? What do you think's going on there? Is this just, I'm going to follow the NBA trail until it ends and then maybe I'll come back to Michigan? Or it doesn't really feel like he wants to do college at all.
No, from my understanding, I mean, we were pretty gung-ho probably about a month ago that he was going to be transferring to Michigan. We were told that he was going to be transferring to Michigan. It was a done deal basically. But things kind of changed when, his professional desires started to pick up steam a little bit. I think a win for Michigan was him not necessarily getting a offer to the NBA combine or not an offer, an invite. He still has a chance, but he really has to blow it out of the water with the G League combine to earn an invite. So, I think it's coming down to it's pro versus Michigan. There's no one else that I foresee getting in there to make him avoid coming to Ann Arbor if he decides to do that. But from my understanding is he just kind of doesn't really want to do the whole college thing anymore, which I understand. I mean, he's like a 5th-year guy. It's like, if you're not a college,
does that mean he's not like? Does that mean he's not the answer? Like you don't turn away a talent like that when your roster is being turned over in this way,
right?
But I think if you bring in somebody that doesn't want to be there, you might be just bringing in the same locker room issues you were having last year, right? But I mean, you need the guy too, potentially, right? Yeah. From a talent standpoint. So I don't know.
It's tough, but at the same time too, it's only a 1-year holdover. He's not a multi-year guy. He has 1 year left. So, I mean, I don't think it's a situation where he just begrudgingly shows up to Ann Arbor and says, "Well, I guess fine, I'll play basketball." But no, I think it's something that
like that too.
Yeah, no, I think I think it's something where he legitimately wants to be in Ann Arbor. But I think his first desire wants to play professionally. I mean, he was born in Finland, so he wants to play in front of family, whether it's overseas or here in the United States professionally. So, I mean, either way, there's got to be some clarity on this situation soon. There has to be by default, but Michigan's got 2 roster spots open. I don't necessarily think they should be in a rush to fill them. But, and this is not to suggest that Michigan is just idly sitting by and watching everyone else do their portal business. I mean, I do think they're actively working the portal and actively working, the 2024 class and beyond. But, it's just, I think Juwan really works in silence, and there's really, when he gets a hold of something or when he does something, he doesn't really tell anyone what he's doing. For media purposes, but also that he's just locked in on someone. So the lack of news in regards to the portal makes sense. But yeah, again, I don't think they're necessarily in a rush to fill those 2 spots, but I think they should fill them relatively soon. When is soon? I don't know, but we're kind of in this flux purgatory of, what they're going to do with these 2 spots, with really only one strong name being apparent right now. There's really no one else with that. There's really no 2 names that have come out as strong possibilities. So, we'll see. And, Michigan hasn't even formally announced their 3 transfers that they have so far. So, it's yeah.
Oh God, they haven't, have they?
No, they haven't. And that's not to create some false yeah. I'm not trying to create some
coming across the wire.
Yeah, it's just they haven't announced them yet. But
I'm this weird mix of I feel like I'm more optimistic than most in terms of I actually, especially modern college basketball, a backcourt of Doug and Caleb Love excites me a lot. I think Terrace Reed could be a good fit with that kind of backcourt.
Mm-hmm.
And then, there's guys like, oh, they could take a jump, blah, 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 whatever. But then part of me is just like, man, I don't know. and then, I don't like doing hot seat talk. But like you were saying, Olivia could be a 1-year holdover or whatever. Like Howard, I don't know what he has to do. I think it might be something we have to see. I don't think it's as simple as a result on paper.
Right.
We said that with Harbaugh going into 21. I don't think anybody said he had to beat Ohio State and win the Big Ten. It was like we wanted to see, because the issue was what the product was on the field, not just that they were losing, but how they were losing.
Yep.
We said that how many times last year. You're so close to winning these games. It's how you're losing them and the mood around the team. So if you can come out and we see that improve, just the morale and the flow of the court, et cetera, whatever, we're going to feel okay. And then, of course, Harbaugh beats Ohio State, wins the Big Ten. It's like, oh, yay. Right. So it's not like Howard has to do blank. I don't think that's the case at all. If he can build this group by bringing these guys in or whatever, and the team looks different.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I know that's not a tangible thing, but whatever. Right.
Yeah.
I think my biggest question might be the backup 5, I guess, at this point, if they don't bring somebody else in. But
yeah, well, I mean, the thing is too, when you look at the portal, I think there's like a couple more weeks left in the portal, and there's new names going in every day. So,
right.
Maybe there's a guy that we haven't even thought about, or we're not talking about, that either enters the portal or just pops out of nowhere that comes up. I still think, that which that allows Michigan to be a little bit more patient instead of just jumping to find a guy to fill a hole. So yeah, I think I really think the biggest holes are at the 4 and the 5 for Michigan right now. And I think probably the 5 more so than the 4.
That's where I critique him.
Yeah.
Because how many 4s are on this roster?
Yep.
That's right. Why is that a problem? Right. That's
Yep. I mean, it's and it's like the point guard argument too. It's yeah. I mean, that's a totally different conversation for another day. But I still think there's time for the basketball program to round out this roster. And I don't think they're forced to do anything. But as long as they're working within the portal when the portal is operating, and they're not in a June or July scramble, I think it's okay. And they still have a chance to get some really good players. I mean, it's not like they're at a point now where they're scraping the bottom of the barrel. As I said, there's guys joining every day, and that who could realistically help Michigan. So, I mean, who those guys are, your guess is as good as mine. But
I do want to say to Howard's credit, what happens, and this used to be. Harbaugh talks way more than he ever used to, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I know we're going to be in the submarine come fall camp, whatever. But like when you move in that silence, right, we understand in the job that we are in, there's a void and people want information. And sometimes people fill that void with anything. Might not be credible, might be complete speculation, whatever. But information has to fill the void because that's what people want.
Yeah.
And then that information doesn't happen. And then Howard gets bashed for not getting the recruit he was never going after, right?
Right,
Because
right.
that kind of stuff is out there. Meanwhile, Caleb Love commits to Michigan. Everyone's like, oh, okay, Juwan, right?
Yeah, right.
If they Burnett, right? It's like, oh, okay. Now that one, obviously, they'd recruit him. That made a little bit of sense or whatever. But I think sometimes we either hold somebody to account to information that filled the void that maybe wasn't credible, or we assume no information. Like you and I have to post on the board sometimes, like, guys, just because you don't hear what he's doing, he's not doing nothing.
Yeah, right.
You don't know more than what the staff does. He's doing something, right? So we'll see. Like I said, I go back and forth where I'm like, I could see them winning 20 plus games next year if things click right. And then I'm like, oh, this could be a complete meltdown.
Yeah. It's just, and you can go back to last season too, as they weren't that far away. Like
that's the worst part about it.
Yeah, like there were a couple of possessions away from having a decent record and being near the top of the Big Ten. But you know what? Those are what ifs. But at the same time, it's like this team wasn't a bad team. It's just it had its issues for whatever reason and whatever happened. I don't know, but I just don't think Michigan was a bad team, and I didn't think Michigan was in a bad way coming out of the season before Jet Howard and Kobe Buffkin left. I mean, Kobe leaving was not in the cards, and good for him because that means that he killed it and earned that right to leave. But yeah, now when you have a couple of departures and obviously Hunter leaving too, now you're in a position where you're like, well, this is kind of teetering a little bit. You got to get it. You got to get the weight on the right side. So, yeah, this is a pretty important offseason for Juwan to get right for sure.
That's such a last point I'll say. It's just such an interesting thing. As soon as you're a first round pick, lottery pick, you go.
Yeah.
Freshman, sophomore, junior, it doesn't matter, right? Imagine if Jim Harbaugh had to replace Will Johnson this year.
Oh, yeah. No, it's –
Will Johnson would be a first-round pick in the 2023 NFL.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? We already saw the report. He'd probably be a top 10 pick next year. And they get him for another year after that because you have to go 3 years, right? So That's the tough thing. It's like you want to not hate on Juwan, but you want to kind of get after him in one spot for roster management because, Kobe left. But, why did Kobe leave? Because he became a NBA caliber superstar in 1 year.
I mean, they developed him.
Right. Right. So it's such a weird thing with college basketball. It's like, do I develop him too much?
Yeah.
Just enough. Right. And then meanwhile, Jalen Wilson is still at Kansas. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Anyway. All right. We'll see. But yeah, obviously we're keeping tabs on that. Everything going on with Michigan recruiting like we talked about today. And then obviously any basketball news we're sharing over at michigan.rivals.com. We love having you on the podcast, whether you're watching us live on YouTube or listening on Podcast X devices. But obviously we'd love to have you join us over at michigan.rivals.com. Subscribe, get into our community on the Den. You can ask our subscribers. We think we have the best Michigan board there is. And we try to provide accurate, credible intel. I said not just fill the void with information. So we're going to wrap this one up today. I appreciate all of you, Josh, obviously. Always good talking to you face to face.
Absolutely.
I'm always just texting you. It's nice to see you. You look good. I know that concert kicked your ass, old man, but you look good.
Yeah, it did. It did. It absolutely did.
That was the last thing I wanted to tell you. I totally forgot and I wanted to bring it up sooner. This is what I'm going to end the podcast with. Did you know, time relative, you going to see the Blink-182 reunion concert last night was on the same timeline as somebody going to see the Eagles on their Hell is Frozen Over tour back in the 90s?
Jeez. Wow.
That's what it is, dude.
Yeah.
There are Eagles. That's our old man band, our classic rock band, Blink-182.
That's crazy. Yeah, that is wild to think about.
All right. On that note, guys, we appreciate you. We'll see you over at the site. Have a good one.